Welcome into the Russ Joy Show. I'm Russ Joy. You figured that out because you're smart. It's also the name of the show. We got a doozy of a show today. We do. There's a lot going on. I don't know if you knew this or not, but apparently the world is going to end because Jalen Hurts hasn't yet cleared concussion protocol. At least that's what all the national media pundits keep talking about. There was an absolute inferno raging on the national media landscape. ESPN, everywhere else.
Oh my gosh, Jalen Hurts has a clear concussion protocol. I guess the Eagles are screwed. Let's talk about the Packers and how the Packers are going to line up in round number 2 because it's all over for the Birds.
We're going to break down why that was an incredibly stupid line of questioning. I'm going to bring up some of yesterday and even Monday's dumbest takes by the national media, and then I'm going to, give you some fodder for work, for school, for calls with your parents later on when they also panic that Jalen Hurts isn't going to be able to play this week because he hasn't cleared concussion protocol. We're going to get into all of that. Oh, and by the way, it was a late night last night. Philadelphia Flyers had a 7:30 puck drop against the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'm Fedotov back in net 2 games in a row after not playing for a month. We'll talk about how he looked and whether or not I think there's actual hope for Fedotov with this organization. And we'll get into some more stuff as well. There's a lot to break down, and I'm happy that many of you decided to join this morning. It is an absolutely balmy 22 degrees outside, at least at my house. Kids got all bundled up this morning. They felt great. They went off to school. They're like, Dad, do we really need to wear a coat? I'm like, what are you? We're not the Inuit people. All right, this cold weather is not in our blood. Now, maybe it is in my blood a little bit from the coal region, but can you genetically pass on the traits that harden you as somebody who grew up around anthracite, right? Because when you grow up in the coal region and it's 20 degrees, you walk around with a T-shirt on, go to school in shorts. Down this way, it gets below like 45 and everybody bundles up like they're about to go do the Iditarod. No. Not here. Not this family. But yeah, they had to put on the winter coats. Anyway, a lot of things to get into today. I'm going to go out to the comments here first. It is a Wednesday hump day here on the Russ Joy Show. And I forgot to mention this before, but we're going to have a little bit of a discussion around Paul George as well. Because I'd seen some fodder that he's been a disappointment. And a lot of people a couple nights ago saying, well, at least you only have a few years left on that contract. And other people saying, how stupid were the Sixers to give him that contract? We're going to get into all of that. We are fair. Remember, we are fair here at the Russ Joy Show. If nothing else, I try not to bullshit you too much. Sometimes maybe a little bit, but not a lot. Chris Freed says college overtime strategy. If the first possession team gets 7, second possession team gets a touchdown, shouldn't the second team go for 2 and end it? Why kick and extend when you have the chance to win it right there? I agree. Although, all right, so let's play this one out. I like that this is the first question of the day from Chris Freed. Okay. If you're in a bowl game that has really no massive impact, unless maybe, I don't know, is there like an additional financial impact to the university? Like what you want to do ultimately, right, is force the opposition to have to kick a field goal or, as it gets to that sudden death, to just shut out the opponent. And then you hope that your team is able to execute down the stretch and you get the touchdown, you win the game. The thing that's embarrassing, or the thing that would be embarrassing, is scoring the touchdown, going for 2 against an inferior team, not getting it, and then all of a sudden the whole thing's been flipped on its head. So, I get why a coach might be hesitant to go that route. But I do understand, you're ultimately there. Hello, you play to win the game. I get it. Now, college football playoff later this week, God help James Franklin, although they are playing Notre Dame. And so, if you're buying into the Catholics versus convicts narrative, James Franklin may not have God on his side this week. But if you were to believe such things, that he does have God on his side, if James Franklin's team goes to overtime, double overtime, triple OT against Notre Dame, right? Let's just play this one out. If they go to triple OT against Notre Dame and James Franklin's Penn State Nittany Lions give up the first touchdown in overtime, Notre Dame goes down, they score, kick the extra point. James Franklin's team puts together a great effort. They find the end zone. And then instead of kicking the extra point to extend it to yet another overtime, if James Franklin goes for 2 and Penn State loses the Orange Bowl because he decides that it makes more sense to just go for the win instead of just continuing to play in perpetuity until you can shut down, ideally, Notre Dame's offense, James Franklin would face a backlash that he hasn't seen since, I don't know, he refused to answer questions about alleged sexual assault of some players involved with the program at some point, which actually happened earlier this year. So I guess it wouldn't be a long time since James Franklin has faced scrutiny. He also faced scrutiny after the Oregon loss. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If you're a Penn State fan out there, by the way, I would love to know in the comments how you're feeling this week. And if you're a Notre Dame fan, you can also chime in. I'm not exactly a big Notre Dame fan, but I'm also not a huge Penn State fan either. I would love to know where college football playoff teams' fans currently are a couple days out from the action really getting underway. There's a small part of me that does hope that Penn State moves on, partially because I don't like. If Georgia had played Penn State, I might have rooted for Georgia. I grew up cheering for Penn State. I don't hate Penn State. I really don't like Notre Dame. Penn State getting to the national championship would be pretty cool. Now, if they win, then I might have to adjust my feelings on James Franklin as a coach and not being able to get it done in big moments. I'm not beyond admitting I was wrong about something. Don't get me wrong. But James Franklin rubs me the wrong way. I don't want to have to admit being incorrect about him. Greg Bondarenko over on YouTube says, "Morning, Russ." Good morning, Greg. Thanks for joining. Chris Reed says, "It's so cold out there." How cold is it? He says, "It's so cold out there that the mayor ordered the de-icing of hookers on Broad Street." Ha, 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 ha. Chris, you're a mensch. Amy says, the endless struggle to get kids to wear a coat. Yes. Yes.
I don't want to wear a coat.
Well, it's too bad.
Dad, it's not even that cold out.
Yes, it is.
Dad, I don't want to wear a coat. I don't need to wear a coat. My friend doesn't wear a coat.
I don't care.
Well, why do you want me to wear a coat?
Because I love you.
Well, my friend's mom doesn't make him wear a coat. Does that mean my friend's mom doesn't love him?
I don't know. Maybe. Possibly. Could happen. Maybe. Maybe she wants him to get hypothermia and die. No. Didn't say that to my kid. Also, I think all of my kids' friends' parents make them wear coats. Now, maybe we have somebody who believes that coats are actually a net negative to children. Coats are actually a bad thing. We don't like the coats. The coats are so bad. And they make the kids overheat. They get sweaty. And when they get sweaty, it gets exposed to the cold. And they all get very, very ill. Maybe that's what's happening. Who knows? Landros, too, says golfed in Myrtle Beach yesterday. A balmy 43. Back to real cold today. Landros, good on you. But 43 degrees to go golfing. Oh, no. Oh, no. Jamie checks in over on YouTube, says, would love the temps to go up a little higher. Till then, the heated blanket is my friend. I'm not betraying the trust of my friend because his wife doesn't listen to the show. I'm not going to name drop the friend. So I get this text the other day, and it's all about how it's freezing cold, right? So my buddy and his family, they moved into a new house like a few months ago. Big, beautiful house. And one of the biggest houses, the biggest, most beautiful houses. So they move into this big, beautiful house, and their heater stops working, right? And it's like new construction. I think the house was built like within the last year. They moved in a few months ago. Maybe it's been longer than a few months. Time is relative. Anyway, they move into this new house, and their furnace is like just stops working. So they call a company out, and like they had been without heat for like 18 hours or something, right? And so their house is cold. They have little kids. It's obviously not ideal. And so they eventually call out a company. Guy comes out and he's like, oh, the motor in your unit's blown. Like it's just, you have to get it replaced and it's expensive. And he's like, yeah, I don't really believe you. I can't imagine that's the case. Now everything in their house is still under warranty because it's so new. And so they call out the construction company or whatever. They come out, they take a look at it. And then what they end up finding is that my buddy put the trash can outside too close to the vent. And so the furnace was overheating and shutting itself off. Okay. But in the meantime, my buddy's wife apparently went out and got a bunch of space heaters, like picked up a bunch of space heaters. And when he came home, he saw that they were all plugged into the same outlet. Now, this is not a good thing to do. And my buddy's wife is a very smart woman who could also kick his ass and my ass too, and many people's ass. I slightly fear her. I do. Respectfully, I do. And if she does hear this, I want her to know that I think she's amazing. But anyway, she allegedly plugged them into the same outlet. So my buddy's a big guy. And he said he's never sprinted so fast to get to the outlet to like rip them out of the wall. I'm not a big space heater guy. I'm just not. They freak me out. I've heard too many horror stories. I don't like them. Heated blankets, like Jamie's talking about. I have never in my life considered a heated blanket because for some reason I've always been petrified that if you put on a heated blanket, it's going to like overheat and you're going to like burn in your bed. And like that's just not fun to me. Like, yeah, it's nice to be warm, but it scares me. Jamie, you can obviously let me know if that is an unfounded fear of mine. But like I genuinely panic about the idea of a heated blanket. The things that we do to stay warm in the cold. When it's the summertime, all we ever do is bitch about how warm it is and how we can't wait until the winter. What's the number one complaint that people have in the summer? It's simple. In the summer, it gets so hot and everybody gets sweaty and it gets all humid and people freak out. Everybody has a meltdown in the summer. Oh my God, it's so humid. It's horrible. You can only take off so many clothes. But in the winter, I love the winter because the winter's nice and cold. And you can always put things on. You can always put on another sweatshirt. You can always put on another blanket. You could get a heated blanket or a space heater. You could bundle yourself up to look like Arnold. Remember Arnold? Hey, Arnold. Remember he had the thing like when he was kind of doing the mush with the dogs, right? It was like the giant coat. And he like went down inside and he had like a fireplace on the inside. And as a little kid, you think that's amazing. I wish I could have a fireplace in my coat someday. But you can't because it's not real. Anyway, in the summer, all you want to do is get to the colder months because you can add clothes on. But in the summer, you can't take... Well, eventually, if you take off too many of your clothes, you get called... they call the police for indecent exposure. They don't do that in the winter when you put on one more coat or your seventh pair of socks. Okay, anyway. I'm glad that I got that out of my system. I love the winter. I do. But it's cold. Now... in fairness, it is still true. You can throw on another hoodie. So, all right. I'm just looking to see if I can find an image. I'll find it at some point during the show. My computer's been about to have a meltdown like all morning, but I'm gonna see if I can find that thing. This is where like having a producer actually would have been helpful to go in and pull the Hey Arnold coat. Some of you might remember what I'm talking about, but like Arnold has the coat. And he's got like they're doing like, I said the Iditarod earlier. And he's doing like the mushing with the dogs or whatever. I don't know. Well, I'll find it. Maybe I'll find it. Oh, no, it's not with the dog because he has the pig. He has the pig. Hey Arnold has the pig. I don't even know how to find it. All right, I'm going to give up. I might find it later. Okay, let's go over to the comments because now I've really taken this show very far off the rails, and I guess that's my fault. It is my show, and these are the things that I do. Let's see. Chris Freed. Whoa, Chris Freed is going somewhere. What's this, Chris Freed? So, my computer's kind of frozen. Hopefully we haven't lost the show, but my mouse right now will not do what it's supposed to do. This is not good. This is not good at all. Chris Freed over on YouTube says, my alarm is set for 3:45 tomorrow, presumably a.m., which is a doozy. Says flight from International is set to depart at 7:05 a.m. Ticket for a seat in section 110 in hand for the Orange Bowl. Chris, enjoy yourself. Feel free to send some pictures, some video, and I'll put it up on the social media channels. I want to see what the atmosphere is like at the Orange Bowl. I assume it's going to be legit. Landros 2 says intern kid would be thrilled. I don't know, thrilled about what? I did have my son there last night. Well, one of my sons. I have many sons, many children. It was his 8th birthday. Yesterday was actually not only his 8th birthday, it was our baby boy's 2nd birthday as well. 2 kids born on the same day, exactly 6 years apart. Is that strange? It is, when you consider the fact that Well, they were two kids that we didn't necessarily expect. They have the same birthday. Isn't that weird? I think it's weird. I don't know what the odds are. Maybe there's a mathematician out there who could figure it out. Jim Cochran says, not a PSU or Notre Dame fan. I just hope they all have fun. I know that there are people who say that they want the opposite, or they say, no. Hope nobody has fun. I hope everybody does have a good time. Andrew Fawcett says, good morning, all. Landros 2 says, electric heaters are fire hazards. This from an insurance guy. There you go. Landros speaking out. He breaks his silence on space heaters. Greg says, I always find it easier to keep warm in the winter than keep cool in the summer. Yeah, I mean, I think it's true. It's just that when you go outside and you're like, you feel bone-chillingly cold, it sucks. Jim Cochran says, pretty sure the number one complaint in the summer is the Phils lineup swinging at pitches in the dirt. That is true. And they still haven't done anything. They still haven't done anything to address it. Oh, Max Kepler. Woo. I keep being told there's somebody in the media who covers the Phillies, Anthony, who told me like a month or so ago, oh, don't worry, Dave Dombrowski's working on something. He's going to answer back. Once the Mets got Juan Soto, the Phillies, they're going to answer back. They have to answer back. They can't possibly think that running it back and making one small tweak is going to be enough to get them back to a World Series. They had to have watched the last two postseasons where the bats have gone quiet and said, an impact bat would sure be great, would be nice insurance in case some of our big money guys can't produce. Of course they're going to find somebody.
It is now the new year. Spring training is on the horizon, and the Philadelphia Phillies have done nothing to address a gaping freaking hole in their lineup.
Okay, it's fine. No big deal. Steven asks, why was Anthony absent yesterday from the show? Because if you watched the Press Row show last night, you would see that it was myself and Adam Kimmelman pregame. We're going to actually clip out part of pregame because Adam Kimmelman did a great job breaking down all the Flyers prospects from World Junior. It was a very insightful segment, so we're going to clip that out, put it over on the YouTube channel, on the Snow the Goalie YouTube channel. It was great. Then Bundy joined me for intermissions and postgame, as did intern Andrew, and then my son, intern Arlo, for the day. We were all there. Anthony was sick. I get this picture yesterday, and it's Anthony at a doctor's office. Like, last time he did that, he was like almost dead from COVID, in the very early stages of COVID, where we got like the email from his sister that they were kind of preparing for the worst. So anytime I see Ant in a doctor's office, I'm like, oh. Now, he's not dead. Well, I mean, I checked in with him yesterday, and he was okay. I have not talked to him today, but I assume he is probably alive. But he was sick, and he was told to, like, lay low for a couple of days. I think he's going to be back on Thursday for the Press Row show. We have so many Press Row shows coming up. I felt bad because we hadn't done an episode of anything with Snow the Goalie since December 21st. And, like, we were trying to line it up, and, like, there are a whole bunch of logistical things we'd figure out with getting down to the studio at Wells Fargo Center and if it's available and all this other crap. So we haven't done it. I felt bad about it. And then I looked at the schedule, and I'm like, we are there last night, then Thursday, Saturday, Monday. I think there are 8 or 9 home games in January. March has, like, 11 home games. That is going to be brutal. But all the people who have, like, missed having us around, don't worry. You're going to get way too much of us. All right, Jamie says, can confirm. I've had 3 over the course of the past several weeks without incident. This is about the heated blankets. Just remember to turn it off if it hasn't been turned off already. Or if it hasn't turned off already. Okay. Amy says, I don't hate many things. I hate the winter. I don't remember what Manny would have been asking here. Can you find it before the Flyers get a center? I think I can find a lot of things before the Flyers get a center. Oh, the image of Hey Arnold. Yeah, I mean, I got to find it. It has to be somewhere. Has to be. I just don't know. Okay. Oh, Amy, this is nice. Says that she and her mom share birthdays. That's nice. Greg asks, what has been worse, the Phillies' cold bats or the bullpen implosions? I think the lineup. I think the lineup is worse. Bullpens, you can just kind of... I think that there's a certain kind of built-up expectation that bullpens are going to falter. Like, even just historically, right? Like, I don't have numbers in front of me or, like, in my... I'm not Rain Man, all right? I don't have this stuff, like, up here, ready to go. But how many times do we see, and not just the Phillies, how many times do we see legitimate closers and setup guys just implode in the postseason where it's like they've been great all regular season, they get to the playoffs, it falls apart, and you go, oh. And then sometimes teams overreact. They trade those guys. They go and they make a big acquisition. They trade away top prospects to get another guy in to fortify the bullpen. Then the next year, they don't even make the playoffs. Like, it's hard. Bullpens, I think, are the trickiest thing. The lineup is the thing that you were supposed to be able to rely on last year. And like I said in the predictions episode for 2025, if you missed the last episode of 2024, it's wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube and X and Facebook. The one team that I'm down on going into 2025 is the Phillies. And I love when baseball is good. I love Citizens Bank Park, and I love taking my family to Phillies games. So I don't want people to think that I hate baseball. You know, Big Bet Bob Wankel and I, we have this like ongoing rivalry of sorts because he doesn't like basketball, and I love the Sixers. And he obviously loves baseball and the Phillies, and I like baseball, but I like very good baseball. If it's a mediocre at best team, I'm not going to go out of my way to watch the full 9 innings. You know? Now, this show kind of changes the calculus on that. Like, when the summer rolls around, like, I will be watching all 9 innings because we have to have, like, an educated conversation here on the show. And I'll have to start diving back into prospects, which I haven't done in a very long time. But I will for the purpose of this show and, like, doing all of you justice. But I have a really hard time getting into the Phillies because Jesus Luzardo is a good acquisition, but he's not a game-changing acquisition. And again, Max Kepler might be a good upgrade over a Marsh and over a Rojas. But I think you needed an impact bat. There was the rumor going around that the Phillies had allegedly offered Alec Bowman, Nick Castellanos to get in on Kyle Tucker when the Astros were looking to move him, which would have been an impact move. But why would they want those two? Like, that doesn't add up. I don't know. There's part of me that thinks, like, the Phillies have been trying to sell chicken shit and tell other front offices that it's chicken salad, and it's just not. And at some point, you are going to have to part with a top prospect or two to, like, capitalize on this window. I have this really legitimate fear that the Phillies are going to just miss that window. And it feels like each and every big occurrence, a trade deadline, an offseason, the front office just misses the boat. And you can always come back to this idea of, well, they did go out and spend. They went and they got Harper. They went and they got Schwarber. They went and they got Castellanos. All of that is true. But they have also missed out on guys. Okay? Like, they have tried to get in on multiple international pitching prospects that just did not work out. Yamamoto, they made a big offer. He turned it down. I forget the name. Yoshi, this offseason, did not want to have anything to do, apparently, with being courted by the Phillies. Juan Soto was a name that we had heard could be interested in Philadelphia, could be interested in reuniting with Bryce Harper and Trey Turner. They didn't even get a meeting. Reportedly, they didn't even get a meeting. I'm not saying that the Phillies have now turned into a place where free agents don't want to go. That is not the case. I just don't think that the Phillies front office right now is willing to admit the fact that, like, this core doesn't work. Like, it's come up short now, multiple years in a row. And you're either going to have to part with some of those prospects and really go all in, which is what Dombrowski usually, historically, has done, or you need to start figuring out how you're going to transition to getting some of the younger guys in here and hope that over the next couple of years, they're going to be contributors to this team and that Harper's somehow going to roll back the clock. I don't see it. Anyway, I didn't mean 25 minutes into the show to get on this thing about the Phillies and being kind of down on the Fightin' Phils. Allison checks in and says hello. Hello, Allison. Okay. I do want to get to one of the big stories, and honestly, it's the biggest story in town, and then we'll get to the Sixers and we'll get to the Flyers. But the biggest story in town is what's happening with Jalen Hurts. And I have to tell you, I think that I'm fair to the national media and to the local media. I really do. This is not to toot my own horn and say that I'm like the be-all, end-all of, hosts doing shows on YouTube or podcasts. But, like, I try to be fair. I really do. There has been so much nonsensical back and forth between national media pundits about Jalen Hurts' concussion protocol and what it means for the Eagles. And, like, I think that we need to actually have a conversation about what Jalen Hurts actually has to do to clear concussion protocol. Because at this point, like, my head is spinning, okay? There are 5 steps to concussion protocol, Okay, and we're going to get into all of them to kind of give you an idea of like why I found this entire thing insane. Okay, I just went to go pull up a site and my computer froze, and we're not doing that. But I'll go through the 5 steps. But I want to start here because Get Up yesterday, they had an absolute meltdown about what happens if Jalen Hurts doesn't play for the Eagles this weekend against Green Bay. What if Jalen Hurts doesn't clear concussion protocol? Is it a concern that he hasn't cleared it? Are the Eagles dead if they can't get Hurts in the lineup? I want you to hear from Get Up what they had to say, and I want you to understand why I continue to just be flabbergasted by some of the mischaracterization of things by the national media. All right, we're going to get into it here. Let me just double check something here quick because I don't think I did the right thing in bringing that up. Let me just double check. I noticed on the last episode that I went to share something out of Twitter and there was no audio. All right, you guys are going to have to let me know in the comments if the audio comes through. Hopefully it does. It should. All right. So Jeff Saturday is over on the right. Greeny, we know. Here we go. This is about Jalen Hurts and the fact that he remains in concussion protocol. Here we go.
I want to ask you the questions directly as I can. Am I living in a world where the Eagles might play this playoff game this weekend against Green Bay without Jalen Hurts?
Yeah, because until you're cleared through the concussion protocol, you're not. To your point, you can't play through it, right? It's not like, oh, I would have played last weekend if it was a playoff game. No, he wouldn't have because he wasn't cleared. He was at their walkthrough on Saturday, which is a good sign that he's out there at practice, but he still has to get some practice work. And then once you start getting practice work, they assess you every day in terms of did you have a recurrence of symptoms? And if you did, you're back to the beginning of the protocol.
Yeah. This is a...
So, and now I stopped that for a second because they're about to get to Jeff Saturday. The actual nugget of truth was just there. Okay? So there are 5 steps to concussion protocol. Presumably Hurts has gotten through 3 of them. The 4th step is that you can participate in non-contact activities. The Eagles had a walkthrough over the weekend that Hurts was at, right? He obviously didn't suit up. He didn't play on Sunday. They haven't had practice on Monday or Tuesday. Practice is Wednesday, okay? So there really aren't any non-contact activities for him to participate in to clear the 4th stage and then to get the evaluation by the team doctor and an independent neurologist. So all of this, like, getting worked up. Now, look, this could age like, spoiled milk. But based on us doing this Wednesday morning around 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, Jalen Hurts hasn't had the opportunity to participate in non-contact drills because after the Eagles beat the Giants with their backups, they haven't had activities he could participate in to clear concussion protocol. So all of this has been insane. And it was just outlined there. As long as he can get through non-contact drills, he can then get to step 5, which is to get cleared by the neurologist and get cleared by the team doctor, and then participate fully in practice, at which point they do then go back, and maybe that's where the problem could lie. But if he does full contact practice and drills, and there is a relapse of symptoms, a reoccurrence of symptoms, well then sure, yes, then it matters. But they literally cannot clear him until the team practices. They weren't going to clear him on Saturday at a walkthrough and then have to, maybe suit him up on Sunday. They weren't going to do that. And again, they couldn't clear him Monday or Tuesday. It all comes down to today. Now, if by Wednesday night, the conversation has changed because Hurts still isn't clear, then it's a problem. If by Thursday, they're saying, hey, he went in, he was a full participant in practice, but he had a reoccurrence of concussion symptoms, and now they're restarting the concussion protocol on Thursday or Friday, okay, then it's a legitimate concern. But if you have lost sleep at any point over the last few days, they haven't cleared him. They can't. They cannot clear him until practice on Wednesday. Okay, now I want to go back over really quick to this clip because Jeff Saturday then. Not surprised. But Jeff Saturday kind of throws out a little bit of an exceptional a little bit of a hyperbolic take here, but here you go. Here's Jeff Saturday.
How big a deal should I be making of this right now in my mind as I'm considering this game?
A massive deal. I mean, this is the difference between, you saying, hey, this is the best team in the NFC, and this team could be eliminated week 1 of the playoffs. It is a massive change.
I want to ask you the questions as directly as I can. Am I?
So Jeff Saturday says that Hurts not playing could be the difference between being the best team in the NFC and getting bounced in the first round. It seems a little bit hyperbolic. Is it true? If Jalen Hurts doesn't play, could the Eagles theoretically lose to the Packers this weekend? Sure. Any team can lose any weekend. So he's not technically wrong. Do I think that if the Eagles had to suit up Kenny Pickett or Tanner McKee, everybody loves the third-string quarterback, Jeff Garcia, Jeff Blake. Nobody actually liked Jeff Blake, but I did because he was great on NFL 2K5. If the Eagles have to suit up another quarterback, it certainly hurts them, right? It will not work. The offense doesn't work the same way as when Jalen Hurts is in there. They'll be able to stack the box to try to shut down Saquon. And ultimately, if we get a snowstorm on Saturday and the field isn't in perfect condition by Sunday, and you're able to stack the box and try to shut down Saquon, and then you tell Kenny Pickett that he needs to go out and make big plays, okay, then maybe I don't feel quite as good. I'm not one of the alarmists who's kind of gone out of their way now for the last few days to say, oh, the Eagles are screwed.
The Eagles could really lose this game. The Eagles are in pole position to be the team that gets upset in the wild card round.
I'm not there. I think that Green Bay is a good team, but I think that this Eagles team, even without Jalen Hurts, should be able to win. Do I love their chances if the Eagles are behind by 4 points with 2.5 minutes remaining in the fourth quarter and Kenny Pickett's got to take the team 70 yards downfield for the game-winning touchdown? No. Did I maybe just manifest that happening? I may have. But again, Hurts can theoretically clear concussion protocol today. We'll know within a few hours if he clears it or not. Like I will keep an eye here on Twitter between now and the end of the show. But as of right now, like I see nothing that makes me think anything different is going to happen. Now, I showed you that clip. Part of this, I keep saying like fur over this whole thing. But like a big reason that people got so panicked is because Schefter tweeted on Monday afternoon, Eagles quarterback Jalen Hurts is still in concussion protocol. It's difficult to do. Now, there was a doctor who responded to it who said, in theory, he has 5 days to clear protocol as of Monday, right? He could have cleared it Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or Saturday because they can make an exception in the playoffs to get a guy back for the next day. I just don't see a scenario where he's not he got hurt in week 16. All right? It has been multiple weeks. You hope, obviously, that it wasn't that serious of a concussion, right? It very well could be a serious concussion, just given the fact that it's been a few weeks. You'd much rather have the guy available to you and going through practices than not. I'm not in a panic mode yet, but some people are. Some people like Ford, for example, who says it's definitely a concern that Jalen has not played football, period. And says, feels like another Eagles season with a ton of promise and a kick in the nuts at the end. Not as bad as the downfall last year, but Jalen in the number 2 seed, not ideal. Dersh asks, has he spoken to the media this week? I don't believe that a player who's in concussion protocol is allowed to speak to the media. Allison asks, says, I've said it before, I only follow hockey, so forgive my question. Are the Eagles really that bad that they'll lose the game because of one player, even though that player is potentially their best player? I don't think so. I think that it certainly makes it a much closer game. I think if the Eagles are healthy, if Jalen Hurts is back in, this could be a 10-point win. It could be a 14-point win. The Eagles have a whole lot of things going their way, and they have had a lot of things going their way through a long win streak. Yes, they hit a bump in the road when Hurts got taken out. The backups were able to beat a decrepit Giants team. I don't think that it's game over for the Eagles if Hurts can't play. I think it makes it closer, and it's not ideal. But we'll see. Again, if by Wednesday night Hurts hasn't been cleared, well, then fine. We can have the conversation. And then on Friday's show, hopefully he will be cleared by then and we can all kind of reflect on this and say, oh, okay, Russ was right. We're good. Wasn't worth getting upset about. But if Friday rolls around and he's still not cleared, then yeah, it's Ford says, what we all wanted or should have is that to get the 1 seed and could have, there's no home field advantage like Philly. None. I mean, sure. Raymond Supper says, to the Eagles fan, Tanner McKee is the shiny new toy Santa left under the tree. Kenny Pickett is the regifted item your uncle gave you. Listen, McKee looked very sharp against a terrible Giants team. I'm not a big Kenny Pickett believer. I think Kenny Pickett in his second game looked a lot more comfortable. I think Tanner McKee looked perfectly fine as a third quarterback against a very bad Giants team in Week 18 that had no real motivation to win the game. I don't think that either of those guys can take you to a Super Bowl. So you obviously have to hope that Hurts is going to be back. Now, here's the other thing that we have to be very careful here, okay? Because if Hurts is out, which again, I don't think is going to be the case, but if Hurts is out or he gets cleared late this week, Friday, or he gets cleared Saturday, you're going to have to play him against the Packers. But, like, there kind of is a question about, like, if he's only getting cleared on Friday or Saturday, it would imply that this concussion was serious enough to keep him out for multiple weeks. And I don't want to raise the alarms here, but if you're going to bring a guy back like a day or two before the playoff game, after he clears concussion protocol, the last thing that you can afford is to have Jalen Hurts become Tua, right? Because Miami has a few times seemingly rushed back Tua from concussions or what have been perceived to be concussion protocol. And while he's still a very good player, Miami fans hold their breath every time he takes a hit. You don't want that with Jalen Hurts. I'm not saying that if he gets cleared on like Friday or Saturday that you say, we're going to hold him out because his long-term value and his long-term health is what's more important. But like if the Eagles did go that way, I know that the fan base would hate it, but like I wouldn't actually blame them. And again, I think that the Eagles are still good enough to win on Sunday against Green Bay without him. But boy, if he doesn't get cleared until Saturday, I don't feel great about him playing against the Packers. Because like long term, he needs to be your guy. You don't have a draft pick that's going to be like you're not in draft position going into the upcoming draft to be able to go, oh cool, like we have a pick from another team that's going to be top 5. We can draft a second quarterback just in case, you know, Hurts goes down like Tua and like starts fencing on the field. Like we don't want that. No one wants that. Joe Papel is correct, says Miami season ended when Tua got hit. Now, granted, he did come back, but it really did derail their season. Chris Reed says, I was at the Sao Paulo game. Take only the win from that game. Field and trip length made that game a one-off. With that said, this game against Green Bay is not going to be easy. It can go either way. I think it's fair. I think it's a fair take. I don't know why Ford keeps putting his same comment in. I get annoyed when he does that. I already brought it up on the screen there, Ford. Keep up, fella. Keep up. Okay. Hurts, I think, will be cleared, and we can all feel good about it. Everybody just take a nice deep breath, a nice deep cleansing breath. Find your favorite meditation app, and everybody just chill. Just chill. Just chill. Okay. Now, I want to get into the other teams in town, because last night, the Flyers played a very competitive game against the Toronto Maple Leafs. And Ivan Fedotov looked pretty good in his second game after not playing for, about a month. Because if you've been following the Philadelphia Flyers in any way this season, you would know that I should just have like a 30-second recap. That like I just press the button over here, and it plays the 30-second recap of Alexei Kolosov going back to Belarus, apparently not being happy here, the organization being worried that he wasn't going to want to go to Lehigh Valley if they brought him back over, and that maybe that's why he's been left here instead of sent down to the AHL where he should be developing because he's not ready for the NHL level, and how they have Ivan Fedotov, but they don't want to put him on waivers because if they do, he might get claimed by another team, even though John Tortorella has very definitively said he is the third goalie on the depth chart and didn't play him for a month, but they kept him up here anyway because, again, they don't want to send Kolosov down because they're afraid that he's going to be gone, but they don't want to put Kolosov, or they don't want to put Fedotov on waivers because if they do, they think another team will grab him because he's 6'8", and you just can't teach that. Is that all fair? Oh, and Sam Erson's also hurt. Third lower body injury of the season. Not ideal in net for the Philadelphia Flyers. Now, Fedotov was a guy that the team, again, it's hard to say. Had they given up on him? Were they trying to walk a very fine line in Kolosov not wanting to run off to Belarus again? Is it a case where Fedotov has been able to kind of remain with the team and practicing? Yeah, like there's truth to that. He's been around the guys. He's been with them. He's participated in practice, but he hasn't seen game action in a month. And now he's played back-to-back games against Toronto. Now, the games didn't go how you wanted them to. But on Tuesday night, Ivan Fedotov was a perfectly fine player. He gave the Flyers a legitimate chance to win the game. And in fact, the Flyers had a lead. Travis Konechny, their big money guy, Travis Konechny had 2 goals on the night. Gave the Flyers a 2-1 lead in the second period. And then things kind of fell apart. And ultimately, Toronto scores on a deflection that puts them up 3-2. Flyers do get a late power play in the third period where Matvei Mishkov draws a hooking penalty. The power play looked like absolute dog shit because Rocky Thompson's power play is absolute dog shit, and John Tortorella, for some reason, continues to just ride or die with this guy. I get that the talent's not there, but it is an absolutely feckless product. It has been an absolutely feckless product since Rocky Thompson has been in charge of that power play. And under most circumstances, a head coach would have made a change by now. This one has not. And the power play is the thing that in theory is supposed to be something you can rely on to get you back into games or perhaps add a little bit of a cushion. And this team, for whatever reason, they will not do anything to change the power play, or at least who's in charge of it. Alain Vigneault did. To his credit, it didn't work, but that was the year that they flip-flopped Mike Yeo and Michel Therrien, right? It didn't work, but they tried. They tried something. I'm not saying put Brad Shaw, the defenseman guru, the defenseman whisperer, in charge of the power play. But Rocky Thompson, it ain't working. It ain't working. Now, again, the Flyers were close. The Flyers had a legitimate chance to win that game against Toronto. In the grand scheme of things, is it a total negative that you've now lost 3 games in a row? They lost 5-2 in Vegas. That was an ugly game. They lost 3-2 in Toronto on Sunday. They lost 3-2 at home to Toronto again. At home, they're not bad results. Now, you could be upset if you choose to be, and some people are, because this is just what people do. There are some people who are upset, and last night Bundy was a little bit bummed out because he thought that the Flyers had played well enough, that they had kind of earned the right to be in that game, to maybe even skate away with a point, maybe even 2. I come back to this. We know what this team is. We know what this team claims they're doing, which is rebuilding. Playing competitive games against top teams like Toronto and ultimately losing them and not picking up a point, while it's a bummer, and while it's a bummer that you were in contention to win the game, not getting those points isn't the worst thing, because right now there's a 7-point gap between the 8th worst record in the league and the 2nd worst record in the league, right, in terms of total points. Chicago is their own brand of awful. The Flyers have 11 more points than Chicago, and Chicago has a game in hand. Chicago's bad. But it's like a 7-point gap. So at some point you have to have the conversation about, like, are the Flyers actually going to do anything in the trade market? And they seem very hesitant, for whatever reason, to send Alexei Kolosov down to Lehigh Valley. No one has been able to give a clear or coherent reason why he's still up here when it looks like he's overmatched. They haven't put Sam Ersson back on IR. They apparently are trying to avoid putting him on IR. And if that's the case, send Kolosov down. Fedotov has looked totally fine now, back-to-back games against Toronto. Now, do I want to see Ivan Fedotov play 80% of the starts from now until the end of the season? No. Do I think that there's value in a 27-year-old, 6'8" goaltender having some film, and that maybe you can convince a team down the road, whether it's this year, whether it's at the deadline, or if it's in the offseason, or if it's at the draft? Do I think that there's value in a team potentially having good film on Ivan Fedotov, and that maybe they would want to give you something for that player? Yeah. Yeah, I could see a scenario where it maybe makes sense. That's what good teams do. That's what great teams do. That's what great front offices do. They find value along the margins. Fedotov was never really viewed as like an along the margins guy, but based on his age and based on this team's timeline, he's probably not going to be the number one netminder for a Stanley Cup contending team in Philadelphia. It doesn't mean that his career is a wash or a waste. It doesn't mean that the Flyers need to trade him, but they might actually get something. Now, Allison has a good note here. I don't know why they're coddling Kolosov. It's annoying. I think if you're a Flyers fan and you're still upset about the Gauthier trade and the fact that he didn't want to play here, let's just kind of remove some of the other things, all right? Let's remove some of the conjecture around why Gauthier didn't want to play in Philadelphia. And let's just imagine for a second that the main crux of why he didn't want to remain here is because Chuck Fletcher had promised him a spot on the roster. And when Chuck Fletcher got jettisoned and Danny Briere and Keith Jones came into town, perhaps they and John Tortorella or some combination made it known to Gauthier or his representatives, look, we're not going to burn a year of your ELC so you could play 1 or 2 games at the end of last season. And at that point, he's like, well, then I'm out. I don't, some team will. If you're upset because Gauthier was their best North American prospect and he forced his way out because they wouldn't bend over backwards for him, good luck with the logical pretzel of being fine with what the Flyers did with Gauthier, if that was a big contributing factor, and then turning around now and them not sending Kolosov to the AHL where he probably belongs, presumably because they think he doesn't want to go play in Lehigh Valley again, or because they can't possibly think that Kolosov playing at the NHL level is developmentally appropriate. It's not. He's overmatched. So, why aren't they putting him down in the A? The only reason you could potentially come up with is that they're afraid that they're going to lose the player, whether it's him trying to get back into the KHL, whether it's him then trying to demand a trade, which would be absolutely stupid on his part. There is no other reason that he's up here. Now, if he were up here because Ersson is on IR again, that's different. The fact that they've been carrying 3 goalies for weeks now is stupid. And again, they don't want to put Fedotov on waivers because they're afraid they're going to lose him, even though they had buried him as the 3rd goalie on the depth chart. It just doesn't make sense, guys. It just doesn't make sense. Okay. Chris Freed says, Snow the Goalie podcast should rename itself the Goalie Blows podcast. It would better represent the life of the Philadelphia Flyers. Well, it's not wrong. Landros says, it's pretty piss poor when a goalie stops 14 of 17 shots and we're calling that a solid game. Apparently, if it's not a soft goal allowed, it's good. He's still brutal. I don't think he's a great goalie. I think he's been passable. And the last goal, it's a deflection. I don't really think it's his fault. Raymond Supper says, Flyers land seem to believe get a guy out of Russia and you get an instant Vazzy, Bob, or Igor. Doesn't work that way. That is true. Now, in fairness, they do have the Russian goalie of the future in Zavragan playing over in the KHL, but I don't think they're going to bring him over right away. Len DeJoseph says, Ivan not terrible Fedotov, at least last night. Landro says, Torts is stubborn. He won't fire a guy even if it makes sense because it's been pointed out to him. Thompson should have been gone in the summer. Briere needs to grow a set and step in already. Ford, correct. The Flyers are in sports purgatory. So are the Sixers. Sixers, in theory, have more upside. We're going to get to them in a second. Amy says, not upset if they lose. It bothers me more that Mishkov is struggling. Maybe his great start set up higher expectations. In fairness, in the offseason, when we sat down with Briere, Jones, and Hilferty, they kind of tried to temper expectations. And they said, look, we're not going to build this kid as the savior of the organization because he's still a young kid and there's a lot to learn. And they didn't want to burden him with the hopes and dreams of an entire fan base's, belief around their team. But it is a concern. Mishkov really is struggling. But man, so much of it has to do, in my mind, right? Mishkov, especially early in the season, was absolutely lethal on the power play. This power play, as I mentioned before, is feckless. It is it looks like one of the weirdest hodgepodges. And strategically, it's a mess. And the execution is poor. And it just feels like they continue to try to roll out many of the same concepts, and they're not working, and they don't have anybody who's capable of putting together a better plan. Mishkov if he were to start getting a few points back on the power play and refine some of that confidence, it'd be great. Now, I will point out that last night he had 7 shots through 2 periods, so he was aggressive. And it was his individual play late in the third period, drawing that hooking minor that did set the Flyers up with a late power play. So, like, again, it's not as if Mishkov is, just because his points are down, that he's not still having some kind of an impact on the game. He had a pass last night that, like, made me practically scream from where we were, right? Mishkov has this beautiful cross-ice pass to Owen Tippett, who's right down by the goal, has the goalie's on the other post. All Tippett has to do is take that puck. He maybe even would have a second to settle it and then rip it, or one-time it in. It's an empty net. Owen Tippett got, an 8-year contract? Got a significant deal, right? A goal scorer has to bury the puck in an open net, and he missed the freaking net, right? Like, the Flyers could have taken that game last night to overtime, and Mishkov set the freaking thing up, and Tippett didn't score. And that's where you come back to, you have a bunch of good players on the team, and I think Tippett is a good player, and I think Brink and Forster are good players. They're not elite players. Mishkov has the potential to be an elite player. You go into the draft again, draft high, and get another Mishkov-level talent, and guess what? Maybe Mishkov has a line mate who is able to bury that. And that's the difference between being a hockey purgatory team and being a playoff team. And then down the line, you can go out and woo a free agent or two to town. And then you become a playoff team into a cup contending team. And it all fits that 2 to 3 year timeline, and everybody's happy. We're all hunky-dory a few years from now. But Mishkov right now, I think he's as effective as he's going to be with the guys that he's playing with. And, like, he was playing on a line yesterday that's Scott Lawton on the second line. What are we doing? I'm not saying it was not an organizational failure to not get a better center for Mishkov to play with in his rookie year. But, like, you better have one next year. Because, like, if you go into the 2025-26 season and Mishkov is still playing with scrubs and, like, journeymen or bottom 6 forwards who are inserted into the lineup to be a second-line center or a second-line wing on the opposite side, like, that doesn't work. That doesn't work for me, brother. All right. A couple of other things here, and then I want to try to get to the Sixers before we head out. Chris Freed asks, does Saturday's game against the Ducks, if it goes poor, be a turning point for how the Flyers fans view the current front office? Yeah, it does, because, like, Drysdale looked bad again last night. I keep coming back to this point, but, like, how do I say this in a way? Like, you have to remember, I'm critical of this team. Nobody at the Flyers tells me what to say or how to feel. What you get from me is the 100% unadulterated way that I feel about the team. Danny Briere and his inactivity in the trade market when actual deals were being made prior to the Christmas break, that was a concern to me. And, like, it was Fletcher-esque. Now, I'm not saying that, like, this whole thing is about to fall apart or that, like, Briere's future as the GM of the team is going to be a disaster. Like, I'm not saying that. But, like, I have to be fair. I would have crucified Chuck Fletcher for not being involved or more involved in the Jiricek trade market when Columbus had made him available. There have been players dealt. The deadline will come up. If the Flyers don't move a Lawton, a Risto, a Frost, if they make no trades, if they make only one trade, like, I will be critical. I'm willing. This is pretty much my last window that I'm willing to give the organization the benefit of the doubt here. You have to make some deals. You can't just sit back and, like, wait for the market to come to you. Like, that's not how this works. I know that people were really concerned because there was an interview that Danny Briere did with TSN Overdrive, and people really got themselves worked up about the rebuild, like really, really worked up. I'll give you this. So a couple of days ago, and I'm going to credit Flyers Nation for the transcription here. Let me get this up on the screen for everybody. This was one of the things that Briere had to say about, like, let's say Mishkov to start. Like, we've heard what the Flyers have thought about Mishkov all season, but this was his quote about Mishkov to TSN Overdrive. There's a chance that Mishkov could turn into a star or superstar, but otherwise, you need depth throughout your lineup. You need your young players to become really good players. It feels like we're trending in that direction, but there's still a long way to go. Consistency is probably one of the toughest things as a young player to find. Now, some people took that quote and they ran with it, and they thought, well, if he's talking about depth, that means he's not going to trade any of those young guys, and that it's going to be an issue. I don't think so. I think that means he views Tippett and Forster and those kind of guys as being fine. That they're not the most incredible supporting cast, that they maybe don't have the same kind of high upside, but they're still good. They're still good players. And if Mishkov is going to turn into the star you want him to be, he's got to have at least competent guys around him. And hopefully they grow together. And if they grow together, the team is ultimately going to be better for it. All right, we're going to go back to another Briere quote from this TSN thing. He says, what I've been most impressed with Matt Fay is how he reacts to the benching, how he reacts to missing a few shifts or being challenged or called out in front of his teammates. He responds. He's got a special character in a good way. He's ultra competitive. I think when he was younger, we heard some rumors that he was a bad teammate, but I think it was part of it is he didn't know how to channel it. He didn't know how to tell his teammates that they have to work harder and work at the same level as him. He's maturing, but really what's impressive is how he answers the bell. Already at his age, he's not afraid of the big moments. He actually welcomes the big times in a game where he can make a difference. He really believes he's there to make a difference. That's not something you can teach. You have it or you don't. You're afraid of the moment or you're not. So far, already at 19, it's impressive that he has that and feels confident enough to want to be a real difference maker every game. Now, I said this last night on the Press Row Show, but the thing that is the most encouraging to me about how Mishkov plays is how Mishkov plays in these big games when he plays against teams like Toronto. When Frost puts up his second half points every year, a lot of times he does that against bottom-feeding teams, which is why people were still kind of down on Morgan Frost. In the case of Mishkov, he rises to the occasion against some of the better teams. He shows up to play. Again, 7 shots through 2 periods last night, finishes with 8 shots on goal, draws that penalty. He was actively involved in that game. And the final stat sheet might not look like he had a huge impact on the game, but he did. He had an impact. And to be just recently turned 20, I don't know, guys. I feel pretty good. Pretty good about it. The part that had people the most concerned, and I'm going over to Reddit for this, they were talking about the rebuild. And this is, I think, where people did actually have the right to be a little bit more concerned and a little bit more upset. Briere says to TSN, I think everybody wants more star power. We all want the Connor McDavid and the Austin Matthews, etc. But the reality is those guys are extremely tough to find. There's a chance that a guy like Mishkov could turn into close to a star or a superstar, but you otherwise need depth. So that was the part that was kind of omitted before. And then he kind of builds off and he says, for us, you always have 2 or 3 guys that are not going and become a good team. And I think that's one of those things that we need. And so it's tough. You look at the teams that are stuck at the bottom of the standings. So it's tough to get there, or it's tough to get out of it. That's part of why when we talked about the rebuild, we didn't want to fall all the way down to the bottom. We wanted to stay competitive and have our young guys learn through a competitive team and a team that has a chance to win and make the playoffs because it's so tough to get out of there. Now, I think that we need to be careful, and I think that maybe we'll break this down a little bit more on Friday. This idea that it's hard to get out of the slop, out of the bottom, there is truth to it. But the Flyers haven't exactly been a competitive team, right? The Flyers haven't exactly spent the last decade as a truly competitive team. They've been an on-again, off-again team in the postseason with Claude Giroux. In the time since Giroux has left, they have largely been an underwhelming team, a far less talented team on most nights. The difference is that some of these teams that do race to the bottom, they end up finding their superstars of the future, and they turn it around. Chicago's really bad right now. Would you like to have Connor Bedard? Bedard's had a little bit of a rough season, a rough rookie or rough sophomore season. Do I think that if Chicago is able to go out and get one of the top players in the draft this year, that perhaps you pair that guy with Bedard and all of a sudden Chicago's future looks a lot brighter? I do. Do I think that if the Flyers managed to pick somewhere around number 3, number 4 in the upcoming draft and pair that player with Mishkov, that it would ultimately be better for them long term? I do. So this whole notion that like it's hard to get out of the bottom, I'd argue it's harder to get out of hockey purgatory, where the team has been for a very, very long time. I would argue it's harder to get out of purgatory because purgatory is where a front office lands when they are trying to win with a team that's not very good and they try to sell themselves on the idea that they're one move away. Chuck Fletcher did that for years. It was a largely underwhelming team, and he would just keep telling himself, if we can get a Matt Niskanen, if we can bring Matt Niskanen back, it's going to change our fortunes. If we go out and get Ryan Ellis, who was hurt, we go out and get Ryan Ellis, it's going to make us a better team. We're going to be a cup contender, which they weren't going to be. If front offices, especially as a GM or a president of hockey ops, as they get to their 3rd, 4th year, they start to feel the pressure. Because if the results are underwhelming, they know there is a finite amount of time before the ownership swings the axe. In the case of Briere and Jones, they came in with carte blanche. They had the ability, if they really wanted to tear it down to the studs and to do that for 2 years. This is the 2nd year. They got lucky that in their first draft, they were able to get a falling Matvei Mishkov. This past draft, they picked Jet Lashenko, who some me believe might have been a reach. And some me had hoped that last year they would have been in a higher draft position where they could have gotten a guy like, an Ivan Demidov, who also is Russian, has played with Mishkov, and probably would have some good chemistry, and I think is going to be a very good player for Montreal. You know, your little fake playoff run last year, your race to try to make the playoffs last year, ultimately was a waste. And I don't care that you think that it was good for the culture. It ultimately was bad for the team. Now, if Chetlachenko somehow becomes the best player, the second best player in that draft, and you could say, hey, well, the guys got to learn what it was like to win and try to go after the playoffs, and we still end up with this great player, then fine. Cool. Great job to the scouting department. Great job to the front office. I'll eat crow 2-3 years from now when we know that to be certain. But as of right now, not totally sold on it. Genuinely not. And if they're going to put themselves in position again to be in hockey purgatory, they have the 8th fewest points right now. If the season were to end now and nobody jumped anyone else in the lottery, the Flyers would pick 8th. Is that a terrible place to pick? No. Would I like to see them fall a little bit more and to be somewhere around like number 4 by the end of the season? Yes. Why? Because lottery luck could dictate that two other teams could jump above you. That's just how the lottery works. So if you finish with the 4th fewest points in the league, the worst you could pick is 6th if you somehow get jumped by 2 teams below you. If only one team jumps you, you're still picking in the top 5. If you're number 8 and 2 teams jump you, that's number 10. And whether it's you think that there's a big talent disparity between number 8 and 10, or you just think it's going to be hard to convince a team that maybe is in the top 7 to move down to 10 instead of down to 8, all of these things matter. They're all factors. Trade Risto, trade Lawton. Lower the ceiling, lower the floor. All right, I've gone way farther into this than I wanted to today. Amy says Mishkov couldn't catch a break last night. Dersh called it a midseason speed bump. The league has got some experience in film on Mishkov to make it more difficult. I think there's truth to that. And also, it's easier to game plan for the best player, the second best player, if you want to call Konechny the best player, and try to shut him down. Landro says, but Russ, you are suggesting an actual rebuild, one where you actually try to get a top 10 pick? Yeah, I know. I'm crazy. I'm absolutely nuts. I know. I'm crazy. Landros also says, I still think there's more in Forster and Tippett. And I hope there is. I hope that those guys have another level to get to, maybe even 2 more levels to get to. They've already committed a lot of money and years to Tippett, and they probably will to Forster as well. I think they're good players. I think that listen, of all the guys that are going to be rotated out of this organization over the next few years as they try to flip the switch, I think those guys are going to be mainstays here. I think that they are. And I think the organization views those guys, and probably Bobby Brink, as other players that they're going to use around Mishkov and around whoever the next draft pick is. And they obviously hope that Lashenko is going to turn into one of their, I don't know, either their top center or their second line center. And like having those guys and having them grow together and learn together, like it's all great, but they have to continue to grow because if not, it's hard. Dirch says it's not fair to judge a team of complementary players for not being superstars. I am not faulting the individual players for not having that other level to get to. I'm merely pointing out that like you can't be a cup contender if all you have are complementary players. That doesn't work. Like that's an actual problem. Allison says the team's been in purgatory since the 2012-2013 lockout. I think you might be correct. Landro says to be fair with goaltending, they might be picking in the top 5. And there you go. Like the unintentional tank, right? I would always joke last year or the year before with Chuck Fletcher. It was like he convinced himself that the team was good even when they weren't. And so it was an unintentional tank because in his mind they were a playoff team, but in reality they sucked. If the goaltending is as bad as it was, like if starting Kolosov all these games is, trial by fire, maybe try to prove to him he belongs in the AHL, and also you're losing games, and so it's good for the draft pick, like, fine. But, like, I don't think that that's ultimately good for anybody's development, right? Again, I'm fine. If the Flyers keep losing games like they did the last 2 to Toronto, where, like, you're in the game, maybe you have a blown lead, and then talent wins out, right? Like, Matthews delivers, Tavares delivers, and you lose games that way, that's totally fine. Like, that doesn't bother me in the least bit. It shouldn't bother you if you're a Flyers fan either. Like, if the Flyers are competitive against really good teams and they don't get, like, boat raced by those teams, you should feel fine about it. You don't want to lose, but, like, that's the way to lose. And ending up with 0 points on that's great. That's fine. Linda Joseph calls it the Broad Street Purgatory. Joe Papel bringing back one of my old isms. Fletcher Mort was the worst GM in decades. Jim Cochran says, are you saying the Flyers haven't ripped things down to the studs already? They've been irrelevant in the city for roughly 10 years. For a few years, our soccer team was more popular. What else could they do? They didn't tear it down to the studs. At no point over the last decade have the Flyers torn it down to the studs. They have not. They haven't. How do I know? Because there are certain players that you could have dealt that they gave long contracts to that they could have gotten something in return for. Travis Sanheim, Travis Konechny are just 2. Big money players, lots of years, that had significant interest on the trade market. They didn't deal those guys. Now, in fairness, based on their age when they were given, well, at least when Sanheim was given his contract, you think he's going to be here long-term and be part of that future. Konechny, I was very iffy on the contract. He's on pace right now for 40 goals, which is awesome. Great for him. And, like, great for him to follow up a big contract with a big season. That's great. But do I think they could have gotten something significant on the market for him? Yeah, like, I do. Do I think that he's going to be here 5 or 6 years from now when, like, you're flipping the script and he's going to be, like, your lead goal scorer or your second highest goal scorer? No. But, like, those are moves that, like, other teams that are trying to race to the bottom, trying to get draft capital, all that, those are the kind of moves they make. Ristolainen could have been dealt multiple times. Lawton could have been dealt multiple times. And they've chosen not to make those moves. Those moves haven't come to fruition. Tearing it down to the studs team wouldn't have come back into the season with Scott Lawton. Wouldn't have come back to the season with Rasmus Ristolainen. Certainly wouldn't get through the trade deadline with both of those guys on the roster. Maybe one. Certainly not both. So no, they haven't torn it down to the studs. They've played this, we're going to try to win while also understanding that we're rebuilding. That shit doesn't work. It doesn't. There's a reason that it doesn't happen in this league. Greg asks, who exactly are the players we are rebuilding around? Presumably, it's Mishkov, it's going to be Lachenko. They seem to think that Bonk is going to be an actual player. They have this goalie depth between Bjarnason and Zavragin down the line that they seem to want to build around. They think that Forster and Tippett are going to be pieces of this thing going forward. I think much of the roster outside of those guys is in flux, which is why I say, like, culture is important, but when most of the team isn't going to be here when it's time to actually win, was the playoff attempt last year really worth it? Landro says, Jet was playing with Lawton and Hathaway-type guys in World Juniors. Was the role they put him in and didn't change it. They went with the 17-year-olds to lead the way offensively and lost. Lachenko actually looked good in his very limited minutes, and we talked about that on the pregame press row last night, which, again, we're going to clip that out on the Snow the Goalie channel, where Adam Kimmelman from NHL.com broke down all of the Flyers prospects. That was a good thing. Okay? All right. Jim also says, I mean, you have a point. Intentionally sucking has worked out for the Sixers, ... I'm just going to put, you can't compare bottoming out in hockey and bottoming out in basketball. There are a million different factors and a whole lot of reasons why. The readiness to go into the league in each league versus like when you're actually brought up, right? Like a young player coming into the NBA can be impactful, can put up 20 plus points per game, can be a double-double threat right away. The league is set up for that. The NHL, oftentimes you're sending a guy either back to junior, you're sending a player back to whichever team. Maybe you send them to the A eventually, and then they develop and they work their way up to the NHL level. You don't have a lot of guys who break into the league as rookies and are legitimate contributors right away. It just doesn't happen. The bottoming out, the Sixers, like, I don't want to have to go all the way back to this, but like Jahlil Okafor looked like a good player in college. The Sixers didn't think he was going to be the guy that fell to them. They thought they were going to get D'Angelo Russell. That didn't work out. Markelle Fultz, I am convinced, had the bike accident, which is what led to the shoulder injury that led to the yips or thoracic outlet syndrome. Ben Simmons had a mental break. I am 100% convinced. I have broken this down on the show. I think he had a total mental break, something that had to do with his family at home. The timing of it was like not coincidental, and he is a broken basketball player, and it's a shame because he should have been the next big thing in basketball. They had a lot of bad luck. A healthy team that has a healthy Ben Simmons, Markelle Fultz, and Joel Embiid playing together for multiple years probably gets to at least one or two NBA finals. I'm not saying they win, but like that's about as good of a core as any team could have had. It just didn't work. I mean, like, there's bad luck, and then there's Sixers luck. Fultz looked like an incredible player out of college. And that one's actually the one that hurts my heart the most. And that after Fultz was dealt out of town, he still spoke highly of the Sixers fan base, even though the Sixers fan base was pretty pissed off with him. I don't know. Okay. Now, last thing. Landro says, let's talk Sixers, the suck. They suck, the end. All right, really quick, because this went way longer today than I intended it going. The Sixers discourse online has gotten more interesting in recent days, and we'll probably do more on the Sixers on Friday, because I don't want to keep everybody here for far too much longer. But there has been an online discourse going on around whether or not Paul George is living up to what the Sixers thought they were going to get out of him. And if you look at his stats over the last few games, it hasn't been perfect. Now, I did praise him on last week, well, one of the shows last week, about his defensive work and the fact that, like, it might not show up on the stat sheet, but, like, his defense has been sensational. His shooting from the field's been bad, and it hasn't worked out for the Sixers as they've been struggling of late. January 2nd against the Warriors, he shoots 7 of 12 from the field, gets you 19 points. On the 4th against the Nets in Brooklyn, shoots 6 of 14 for 17 points. The bigger concern was a couple of nights ago against the Suns at home, a game that this team probably should have been able to win. He goes 5 of 18, only gets you 13 points on the night. That's where the real concern is. I think that, to his credit, right, I'm going to try to give the guy the benefit of the doubt at least a little bit. That was a game where Embiid's not playing. And I think it's really hard if you're brought in to kind of be the third guy. I think it's really hard to try to settle into that third guy role when the big man can't play every night. That, to me, is like the real issue with Paul George as a Sixer. On most nights, he's supposed to be the third option. When Embiid is out, he becomes the de facto second option. Now, Paul George has played that role in LA. He's played that role previously in Indiana, at least his rookie year. Like, he has played second fiddle before. He played second fiddle before in OKC. But I don't think he's used to what second option looks like in Philadelphia. And I've said it all season, and I guess I'll just keep doing it. Again, I should have a button for this. This team is built around the 3 stars with a bunch of role players who have very defined roles and don't have high-level upside. In a sense, they are kind of like what the Flyers are. A lot of younger, well, in that case, it's a lot of younger guys that are complementary pieces but don't have the elite skill set and don't have another level or maybe 2 or 3 that you would need to get them to be, excellent all-star caliber players. The Sixers just don't have that. So when you're missing Joel Embiid, and then you get a poor shooting night out of Paul George, and despite the fact that you do get a big night from Tyrese Maxey, and Kelly Oubre does have one of his, breakout games where he gives you almost 30 points himself, maybe that is fair. Maybe it's fair to ask more of Paul George as the second option on the night. And maybe it is fair to be disappointed in how he played against the Suns. But I have a hard time faulting a guy in his first season with the team now trying to straddle this line between being the third option in a big 3 and then being the number 2 option when the big man can't play. And I think that's the issue. That's the thing that I keep coming back to. And I'm not trying to make an excuse for the guy, but I don't think all of a sudden he's a shitty player, and he's still better than Tobias Harris was. But is it fair to critique the fact that the shooting's been lackluster and that in games where Embiid isn't playing, that he hasn't grabbed a game by the throat? Sure. And is it a concern because he has been dogged throughout much of his career as being a guy who just doesn't deliver in big moments? Yes, that could also be a concern. But I'm not ready to wave the white flag on Paul George just yet. All right, we're going to end there because that's kind of maybe a little bit of an upside, a little positive way. Jim Cochran says, the reality is we knew the PG signing would go like this. We just hoped it wouldn't. Well, injuries derailed him right in the preseason, which we knew could be a thing. I don't know. I'm not ready to give up on him. And again, we saw what this team can look like head-to-head with Boston when they are healthy and when they're all kind of clicking on all cylinders. They're 6 games under 500. They had a terrible start to the season. I could absolutely see a scenario where this team manages to get themselves back to 500. And if they do, I've been saying all year, get to the 6th seed. I think that the 4th seed is still in play, right? I still think that this Sixers team is more talented than the Bulls, the Pistons, the Pacers, and the Hawks. The Heat are going to get bad whenever they trade Jimmy Butler, who's not happy there. I think the Bucks will still move into that top 4 probably. Orlando will fall. I still don't know what to make of Cleveland. But you could probably still end up in that 4 to 6 range just based on talent alone if you can get healthy. Ford says the Sixers, they're 14-20. They'll probably get above 500 at some point, but who cares? They will not win anything legitimate. And maybe they win a round in the playoffs, but who cares? It means nothing. Ford is very upset. Very upset. Ford is very worked up about the Sixers. Very, very upset. Now, look, if they get into the playoffs healthy, they are going to be just as talented as virtually every other team in the conference, with the exception of probably Boston. But the problem that they're going to run into here is they're now 34 games into the season. If by, let's say, the 60-game mark, if the big 3 haven't played together consistently in any meaningful way, then I do think that the ceiling of what this team could do is drastically lowered. Because at some point, those 3 have to be able to build chemistry, build cohesion, and Paul George does have to settle into that third role and do so effectively. And if they can't, then it won't matter. All right. That's it. That's it for today. I want to thank everybody who joined me over on YouTube, X, and Facebook. Thank you so much for joining live. If you watch the show after the fact, make sure you still like the video, share the video, and subscribe to the channel. If you subscribe to the Joy Media channel and you're watching on YouTube, thank you. But you can also head over to the Russ Joy Show YouTube channel, subscribe there. Our biggest show ever was on Monday. Apparently, people were very, very excited. They were unbelievably excited about the Emmanuel Acho, Joy Taylor thing. We'll see if there's any more fallout by Friday. And hopefully, by this time on Thursday, we will have a better idea of where Jalen Hurts is in concussion protocol. I'm just really quickly going to frantically search Twitter and see if there's been any update. I don't think there has been. We'll see if he gets cleared from concussion protocol. It should be today, Wednesday. We'll see if it happens or not. All right. I hope that everybody has a great rest of the day. And if you run into a coworker today who's freaking out about Jalen Hurts, just remind them, today is really the first day he can get cleared in concussion protocol. And it's all going to be okay. Probably. Maybe. We'll see. If you're a Penn State fan, enjoy the Orange Bowl. I hope that you have a great time. And I will say, let's go Penn State against Notre Dame. I can't have Notre Dame win. I just don't like Notre Dame. All right. I'll be back on Friday with the Russ Joy Show. If you're a pro wrestling fan, remember, this time tomorrow morning, Thursday morning, 8:30 a.m., It's Just Wrestling. Go subscribe on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll break down Monday Night Raw on Netflix and AEW Dynamite and anything else that comes to mind. So until tomorrow or Friday, I've been Russ Joy, but you already knew that because you're smart, and it's also the name of the show. Have a great, great day, everybody. Talk to all of you later this week. Bye now.